The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has urged a meeting of allies, including Australia, to step up their support in the fight against the Islamic State group in the Middle East. The move comes after the US President Donald Trump's surprise announcement that he'll be withdrawing American troops from northern Syria.
Mr. Trump says a formal announcement that all territory has been retaken from the Islamic State group in Iraq and Syria could come as early as next week. For more, we're joined from Canberra by Professor John Blaxland. He's the head of the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at ANU. How accurate is that prediction from Donald Trump that as soon as next week that they would have regained all of the IS territory?
Karina, thank you. It does look like the American and the coalition forces have pretty well snuffed out the last remnants of the territorial claim of Daesh or ISIS inside Syria, or they're on the cusp of doing so. The remnants are in the hundreds, if not a few thousand, and the sense is that on one level at least, this particular head of the jihadist hydra is being finally cut off. And I think that's probably fair to say. But of course, we know that we've gone down this path before. We felt we've been on top of the coalition of the West and of the willing, have been on dealing with jihadist groups in the past, thinking that they've nailed them. And another manifestation has come up in the Middle East and elsewhere, including in places like the Philippines. So while it does look pretty clear that the coalition has pretty much got the remnants of Daesh or ISIS in the last piece of turf, some people say it's an area the size of Central Park in New York. It might be smaller than that now, where they're still huddled up together, cornered with coalition forces operating on different sides, and with the remnants basically having few options other than to surrender or be captured or be killed.
John Blaxland, at the same time as Donald Trump makes this reference to his previously announced plan to withdraw from Syria, Mike Pompeo at the same time says that the fight against ISIS may not necessarily be militarily led, that the drawdown of troops is essentially just a tactical change, not a change in mission. What does that mean?
Well, that reflects a couple of things. One is that Daesh or ISIS really has the opportunity to re-emerge in different manifestations, and they're mindful that the experience in Iraq a few years back, when they left in 2011 under Obama's term as president, left the ground fertile without governance and justice and economic opportunity for extremists to re-emerge. So there is a sense that while the militant group has been effectively militarily defeated, is on the cusp of being fully defeated, we know that there's the ingredients there for this to re-emerge. So if they want to stay on top of that and prevent it from re-emerging, they need to remain engaged. And that means actually the United States playing a leading role. Now, we've heard President Trump talk about letting other people in the coalition do it. The bottom line is that no one else in the Middle East has the ability to act as the core essential capability to hold a coalition together. Not many countries want to work with the Saudis, not that many want to work with the Turks or the Russians for that matter. And of course there is concern about Iran. And that gets to the other reason why the United States is probably going to stay engaged and how this is going to spin, if you like, in terms of American priorities. And that is because of the fear about Iran and the Trump presidency's fixation on Iran, which reflects also the concerns about Israel. Israel's concern about Iranian support for the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course the actions of extremist groups on Israel's border in Syria. So the combination means that the United States probably is going to keep a footprint, but this gets into legally dubious territory because the whole American congressional mandate for the war, the so-called global war on terror, is actually about dealing with terrorist groups. And if the United States is to maintain a presence inside Syria or Iraq with the express purpose of focusing on Iran, well, that's actually beyond the remit. And that's actually a real significant legal challenge for the United States to grapple with. Added to that is the problem inside Iraq, because Trump has been saying, well, we're going to keep troops in Iraq to deal with Iran. And the Iraqis are saying, hang on a minute, you weren't here to do that. You were here to help us deal with Daesh or ISIS. And we want you to kind of help do that and consolidate our forces, and Australia's playing in this space as well. We've been training the Iraqi forces so that they can have the capability to defend the territory and prevent a re-emergence of jihadist extremists. But the United States is now saying, oh no, well actually we want to deal with Iran. Of course, Iran and Iraq are actually now much closer together than they've been in the past. So this is a real conundrum.
Why is it that so many Democrats oppose leaving Syria? Is it simply because it's Donald Trump proposing it? Because Democrats are not usually so hawkish.
Yeah, Karina, you're bang on. Of course, the Democrats are opposing this because it's a Trump idea. And it's also a reflection of a shift in priority that is it's more minimalist in terms of American footprint abroad. It's consistent with Trump's America First and almost, semi-isolationist inclinations of the base, if you like, the political base of Trump's presidency, which is a strong reaction to the post-Cold War neocon expansionist view of America's role in the world. And of course, that's compounded by the fact that now the significance of the Middle East for American energy supplies, oil, and of course, economically is far less than it used to be. Now, of course, the real challenge is about China and also to a certain extent Russia. The combination and what's happened in the Middle East has given space for Russia and China to actually align themselves in a way that is inimical with American interests, and certainly that's probably the case with many countries in the West would view it that way as well.
What's the appetite among coalition nations to take back captured IS militants? Donald Trump wants them repatriated, tried and locked up. It's not just about paying for the ongoing mission, but for these allied countries to take a role in removing these militants from that region.
Yeah, it's a problematic one, Jeremy, absolutely. It's a problematic one for Australia. It's the case across many countries where they're from, including Russia, but many countries in the West, France, Britain, Australia, Belgium and elsewhere. This is really legally problematic. People don't want them to come back, really, I think to a large extent there was a kind of an expectation, if not a hope, that the campaign would actually have seen them killed in battle. And that would have been a convenient closure of the matter. But of course that's not the case, so there is this legal issue remaining. But there's another issue which is also worth considering, and that is if this American footprint does get reduced to the extent that it appears it will, what happens next? And that's the question about, well, what does Saudi Arabia do? We know that Saudi Arabia, American equipped, American funded to a certain extent, is operating inside Syria. The Turks are operating there as well, and of course the Russians are operating in this space, and we know that there are meetings afoot between the Turks, the Russians and the Iranians about what to do. And of course, in addition, we've seen Turkey play a bit of a double game when it comes to Syria, because they want to deal with the Kurds who operate inside Syria, in Turkey and in Iraq and parts of Iran, are seen as the hotbed of terrorism from a Turkish point of view, and the Turks want to deal with that, but they also recognise that they need to get on with Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. He's not going away, despite President Erdogan of Turkey's best intentions of trying to get rid of him. Nowadays it's recognised as not really viable, and so they're trying to make up a deal that's going to, some kind of modus operandi that will see them survive and live and let live, if you like, in a fraught space. But the future with Russia, with Iran playing in this space, and we've heard talk of Iranian highways coming through, an American presence being positioned to try and perhaps block that highway, although that doesn't look all that likely at this stage, is certainly the combination of these factors means that this is a problem that's not going away. Now, there are appeals, and you would have heard this, we heard that before, for others like Australia to stump up and do more. I would caution strongly against that. This is a space, the Saudis are invested here, they've got the resources and the equipment, the Turks are invested. we really don't have anything to offer when we're not operating alongside a substantial American presence. And we've still got troops in Iraq, of course. I'm not saying we should abandon that immediately, but we need to be mindful of the consequences. And of course, what are the other big consequences? Well, on the other end of the Eurasian landmass, there is far greater contestation emerging. There is concern about what my colleague Brendan Taylor calls the 4 flashpoints: the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan issue, the South China Sea and the East China Sea. And the one that looks to be hotting up this year is, of course, the Taiwan issue. So that means that for Australia, for the West, we need to be hastening very, very slowly in terms of any ideas to ramp up in Syria or in Iraq. My sense is that this is something we really should be looking to wind back from, acknowledging that the American presence with a limited footprint probably still has enduring importance and utility, and probably will stay for a while.
John Blaxland, good to talk.